Welcome back to me reading Transported, a Wings of Fire story. This time, chapter 15. As usual, if this is your first time watching this little series, I recommend you to watch the previous chapters or read them yourself. Now, let's begin. This chapter's name is Broken Bonds. The sun had begun to set, leaving a bright orange glow to the sky above. Small crashing waves soaked the glistening sand on the shore. A few seagulls flew about, circling the ocean as they playfully squeaked remarks at one another. Daniel was watching the beautiful scene in front of him from the inside of his makeshift cavern. He had successfully dug a large enough hole in the wall to serve as a hut for as long as he needed. He was able to fully stand up inside it, and he had covered the floor in soft sand. So it was more comfortable to lay down and relax. It could probably fit the whole jade winglet inside. It would be a little cramped, but it would definitely work. It took at least 5 hours to fully dig it out, another 2 to get rid of all the excess dirt by chucking it into the ocean, and finally 1 more hour to decorate the inside with sand. In total, it took Daniel about 8 whole hours of straight work to complete it. Now he had just finished eating the roasted seagull he had brutally murdered earlier. The bones of the bird lay in a small hole next to him. Well, that was a good meal, Daniel said to himself as he buried the remains of his delicious seagull delicacy. He stared out as he saw the sun disappear beyond the ocean. Pantala is somewhere out there, Daniel thought. I wonder how they're doing. I mean, Wasp is probably still in charge. That sent a shiver down his spine, knowing that lizard. Okay, knowing that Lizard and Cottonmouth was still controlling everyone, even Wasp. Let's not think of that. According to the books, it all works out in the end, so it's all right. Daniel walked out of the cave and took a look at the starry night sky. Wow. Now that is truly something gorgeous, Daniel thought at the beauty of Pyrea's night engulfed. The beauty of Pyrea's night engulfed him. The sun had just set, so it wasn't fully dark. However, it was still a sight to see. While on Earth, stars wouldn't appear that early after sunset due to the light drowning them out. However, in Pyrea, for some reason, the logic didn't apply, as stars could be seen as they glinted in the sunset's bright orange fade. The orange blend was gradually becoming darker as the sun sank further below the horizon, and more stars decided to come out of hiding. I need to take a fly, see what this is like higher up. He lifted off into the air, doing a few flips as he did so. The cool breeze whipped past his face and body as he continued to fly about. Higher and higher he flew, the world below becoming smaller and smaller. He eventually reached high enough to see the edge of the desert in the very far off distance. He never saw this because the last times he came up here, there were clouds blocking most of the view, unlike today. He had come up to this height twice, once by himself and once with Winter. Winter, Daniel thought. It was only yesterday that Winter had called him his friend, which was truly an amazing achievement. He suddenly remembered his promise, or the promise he made to Winter yesterday, to never abandon him. And yet, the first thing he did the next day was run off without a word. Daniel felt guilty. No. He had broken the one promise Winter gave him, in less than a day's time. God, what kind of friend am I to break a promise in less than a day? He sat there, feeling bad for a while. The night had suddenly become cold. Clouds had begun to move overhead. He looked out at the wide world of Pyrea in front of him. It was still a beautiful night. However, the only thing Daniel felt at the moment was regret. It's decided. I'm heading back to the cave and the jade winglet. I won't last long on my own. I need them, Daniel thought. The wind picked up and rain started to fall. First thing in the morning, Daniel added mentally. He flew back down to the shore and into his little cavern cubby. The rain above picked up, Daniel shot a large blast of fire at the sand inside the cavern. Due to the fact that he wasn't able to find anything flammable out in the desert, and his little stash of desert willow was left in his bag with the jade winglet, his only option for warmth was to scorch the sand and warm it up with fire. I definitely was. What? I definitely wasn't ideal. We love typos here. They make us laugh. I definitely wasn't ideal, as the sand would just cool back down again in less than 15 minutes. However, it was the only thing that he could really do. Daniel sped inside his now somewhat warm. Okay. Sped. Daniel sped. Sure. Daniel sped inside his now somewhat warm of a cave. The smell of cider and smoke, the smell of cinder and smoke filled his nostrils for a few seconds before it died down. Daniel lay down on his sandy bed as he watched the droplets fall outside. There was always the slight fear that his cave would collapse on him in his sleep, especially during storms, but he would take the chance over not sleeping at all. It's going to be a cold night, Daniel thought, closing his weary eyes. The warmth of the sand relaxed the rest of his body as he began to fall into a deep sleep. First thing tomorrow, I'm going back. With the jade winglet. Winter was sitting in his cold, icy corner of isolation, as usual. He was carefully watching Hurricane's pouch and was making sure nobody touched it. He looked towards the rest of the group. Everyone seemed to be doing their own things. Moan and Pearl were talking to each other about something related to how fire scales came to be and how a dragon could possibly inherit them. According to a scroll that Moon had once read in the library back at Jade Mountain. Really? Is that how it works? Pearl asked. She looked completely intrigued with Moon's explanation. Yep. According to the scroll, at least. Who knows if it's right or wrong, but it's the most realistic explanation. There's also evidence to back it up, such as... Moon started. Winter stopped paying attention. He didn't really care much about the boring history of fire scales. He didn't really care about he didn't care much for history at all. So he turned his attention to Kinkajou and Turtle. Both dragons were happily cuddled up together as Turtle attempted to teach his girlfriend, Kinkajou, how to read. However, she mainly kept getting sidetracked and overall wasn't learning much. Although it looked like Turtle was just being happy, being as close to her as he was now, even if she wasn't learning. Oh, come on, Turtle, Kinkajou whined. We just left school, and now you want me to go back to learning? Yes, Kinkajou, you need to learn to read, Turtle responded. But I don't want to, Kinkajou whined again. Can we at least just have a quick nap beforehand? Fine, Turtle smiled. Immediately, Kinkajou wrapped one of her small pink wings around him and settled down to sleep. Turtle turned around the cave before giving her a quick peck on her forehead. He then settled down to sleep as well, still cradling her gently. Winter had to look away at that point, not because he didn't like the fact that they were together. We love typos here. They make us laugh. Not because he didn't like the fact that were together. He actually was really happy for his friends and how they managed to get together. He had to look away because deep down he knew that he wouldn't find someone like that. Small tears began to form. However, Winter managed to hold him back. It's been at least 4 hours since he'd kissed Keebly in front of everyone. In reality, he didn't mean to. It was just in the heat of the moment, and he wasn't able to hold his feelings back. He took a glance at Keebly, who was sitting in his own corner of isolation. He was staring back at Winter, but tried to play dumb when Winter looked over. Just amazing, Winter whispered to himself. He placed his talons over his head and put his head on the solid stone floor. I can't believe I let myself do that. What is wrong with me? Winter yelled aloud. Kinkajou and Turtle were awakened by Winter's sudden outcry. What happened? Kinkajou said groggily, turning to Turtle for answers as she wiped her eyes with her talons. Turtle was also just as groggy as Kinkajou, but managed to shrug it off a bit. to shrug it off a bit easier than her. I'm not too sure, he replied as he looked around the cave for answers. It was Winter, Moon whispered to the sleepy couple. She didn't want to alert Winter that they were talking about him, since it looked like he already had enough troubles on his mind. He didn't need another one. He just cried out of the blue and now is, well, Pearl added as she gestured to what looked like a very depressed Icewing. The rest of the winglet turned to look at him, besides Keebly, who looked just as miserable in the opposite corner. They felt bad for them. They had a fight over Winter's kiss. Winter immediately blamed himself after he made his sudden action, and when Keebly tried to reason with him about how it wasn't wrong, Winter came at him and about how it was, considering he knew about his crush on Hurricane. However, it hit him that Keebly wanted that to be kept secret from the others for a little while longer, and soon the discussion began to spiral out of control. Both boys shot multiple insulting remarks at one another until Keebly eventually said something he couldn't take back. Flashback. Winter and Keebly parted the kiss after a few moments of tense silence. The rest of the group didn't know how to respond to what was happening in front of them, so they just stood there, wide-eyed. Keebly looked into Winter's deep lapis-colored eyes. A small red blush creeped across his snout. He didn't know if it was because he had just been kissed by his best friend or something else. So that's who you love, Keebly said disbelievingly. Winter looked around at everyone else and soon realized what he had just done. Oh, moons! Winter cried. He covered his mouth with his talon. Oh, moons, oh, moons, oh, moons! Winter chattered. Whoa, hey, calm down, the Winter. It's all right, Keebly said with one of his signature smiles. How is this all right? I just kissed you. Winter was now panicking now, walking back and forth, quickly, slowly breaking down. How was it bad? You're just expressing your feelings, Kingjaw said from the side. Yeah, if anything, you should be happy you finally got off your chest, Winter. Winter added. No, you guys don't understand, Winter said. Then make us understand, Moon interjected. Keebly already has a crush, okay? And it's not me, Winter yelled, which means that it was wrong for me to do that. Do you understand now? Keebly looked at him, confused. What do you mean I already have a crush? Oh, don't act dumb, Keebly, Winter spat. I've seen the way you look at him. It's obvious. Who are you talking about? Or, that was an exclamation mark. Who are you talking about? Keebly demanded, now a bit mad. You're really going to make me say it in front of everyone. I wouldn't think you'd want them to know. Winter, I literally have no idea who you're speaking of, Keebly yelled. I'm speaking of Hurricane. Who else? Winter responded with the same volume. Keebly fell silent. Now that he had thought about it, he had to admit that he liked the Red Skywing a little more than usual. See, Winter said, his voice softer than before. I told you. Plus, he already knows anyway. Wait, how? Keebly asked skeptically. If I didn't even know until this moment, then how would he know? I told him, Winter stated flatly. Winter, why would you do that? Keebly shouted angrily. He was going to find out anyways, considering how flat you are. But still, you don't do that! The rest of the dragons present watched as Winter and Keebly continued to argue of who was right and who was wrong in the situation. Shouldn't we stop them? Kingjaw asked. No point. Even if we tried, they'd just ignore us, Pearl pointed out. We should at least do something, right? Moon, are you able to hear what they're thinking? Turtle asked curiously. No, but their thoughts are so mixed up in the fight that it's impossible to tell if they really mean anything that they're saying to each other, Moon said worriedly. But what I can say is that we love typos here. They make us laugh. But what I can say that this won't end well. And that was true, as while the rest of the Jade Winglets spoke about trying to stop them, they hadn't realized that the argument had already escalated to extremely tense levels. Just shut up, Keebly! You don't even know what you're talking about when it comes to my mind, Winter bellowed. I wish you would just stop trying to read dragons like a scroll and actually bring a good clawmate. Yeah, well, I wish I never had you as my clawmate. Actually, I wish I just never met you in general. Winter froze at this moment. It reminded him the argument both of them had earlier. They had gotten over it quickly, but that was because Hurricane was there to help out and help sort things out. Not this time, though. Keebley suddenly also fell silent. He had done it again. He had made the same stupid mistake as last time. He had gone too far. He looked up at Winter's face. It was a mix of sadness and what looked like humor. Winter, Keebley said softly. He was about to apologize when Winter started chuckling. So does everyone else, Keebley, Winter said. These words made Keebley feel even worse. As he watched Winter walk away towards the back corner of the cave, he turned to his friends, who avoided eye contact with him. What's wrong with me? Keebley whispered to himself as he walked to his own corner of the cave, opposite to Winter's. Back to the present. Hello? Turtle, you there? Kikijao questioned. This snapped Turtle back from his daydream and into reality again. Oh, yeah, sorry. Was I daydreaming again? Turtle asked, a little embarrassed. Yep, Kikijao replied. Right. Sorry. No, it's fine. Plus, it's cute. Kikijao teased. Shut up! Turtle yelled, a bright red blush forming on his face. He turned his attention to his friends, who were sitting in opposite corners of the cave. They both looked depressed. Very depressed. Jeez. They must really regret what they said to one another, Kikijao said, her scales turning into a darker shade of blue. Yeah, Turtle sighed. Wait here. I'm going to go talk with them. All right. Good luck. Kikijao flashed him a smile as he left. Walking towards the dispersed dragons, they both looked up at him. They weren't close to one another physically, but they were still close enough to each other as well. What do you want, Turtle? Winter mumbled. I'm here to fix your friendship between you and Sandy over there. Turtle joked as he turned to look at Keebley in the corner. He had to admit it was actually kind of worrying seeing such a cheerful dragon look so dead inside. Don't bother. All he has to say is how much of a jerk I am, which I already know. Plus, he won't want to talk to me anyways. Keebley was about to interject when he fell silent, knowing that Winter was right, to some extent. Guess he also learned how to read dragons like a squirrel. Oh, come on, Winter. It's not that bad, right? You guys are best friends. For over a year, if I must add. You can't hit it now. Correction, Turtle. Keebley suddenly interjected. We were best friends for over a year. Moons, you guys are so stubborn. Just talk to each other. You can't forgive and forget. You can forgive and forget, Turtle yelled. Turtle looked from Winter to Keebley. It was clear to tell they both blamed themselves for what happened, and they still wanted to be friends. However, it was also clear they both thought the other dragon hated them, so they didn't try to speak or fix things, as they thought it was a waste of time. Just leave us alone, Turtle. Don't try and fix what can't be fixed. Winter spat before he turned away to go sleep for the night. Keebley just looked at Turtle with sad eyes before heading off to sleep himself. Hurricane would know what to do in this situation, Turtle said to himself. He had to admit it was strange. He was able to understand both dragons, as if he had already known them for years. He was able to make dragons who hated each other change into the best of friends within 5 minutes. He was the only one who could fix this. Moons. Hurricane, where are you when we need you? Turtle whispered to himself. And that is the end of the chapter. Except for, as usual, the author's note at the very bottom. Hello, people. I have returned with another chapter. I know it was mainly filler. However, I wanted to get a chapter like this done and add some drama to the story. So, I apologize if it wasn't as interesting or as entertaining as other chapters. Also, I will be taking a break for a bit, as I have other things to do from now on, as my school holidays officially finished a few days ago. So, if I don't update in a while, know that I haven't forgotten the story, as I do want to finish it, and still have plenty of ideas for the future. But besides that long and boring comment, I'll see you guys again, hopefully. Sayonara. So, I think this might come up a bit, but like, when I whisper into the mic, it's like their own internal thoughts. Like, I got the idea off of what Napoleon does in Waterloo, where he like whispers, and that's him thinking. So I wanted to, explain why I did that. So many different dramas and relationships. We love to see this. I love to see the characters clash with each other. Jokes aside, looks good so far. All right, see you next time.